Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. On behalf of Strategic Vision Institute, I welcome you all to today's webinar on Kashmir dispute, ideological, legal, and a humanitarian perspective. I'm Dr. Amin, Research Officer at Strategic Vision Institute, Islamabad. First of all, I would like to extend my profound gratitude to our esteemed speakers and our participants who have also joined us virtually today. Ladies and gentlemen, the webinar has been organized to express solidarity with the people of Kashmir and their right of self-determination, and in condemnation of the atrocities committed against them by the Indian occupational forces. Therefore, the purpose of today's webinar is to analyze the Kashmir dispute from the ideological, legal, and humanitarian perspectives. For this, we have a distinguished panel with us. The first speaker of our webinar is Brigadier Khurshid Khan, Principal at Cadet College, Palandri, Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. He is also a fellow at the Stimson Center, Washington, D.C. Brigadier Khurshid has held multiple portfolios, including Director, Research and Publications at ISRA NDU. He has also served as a faculty member at the Department of International Relations, NDU, and NAST Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, NIPCONS, Islamabad. Our second speaker is Mr. Muhammad Awais Anwar, Director Research at Research Society of International Law. Mr. Anwar helped found the Conflict Law Center at RSIL and served as its first director. He also provides legal advice to a variety of government departments at the federal and provincial levels across Pakistan. Our last speaker would be Ms. Farzana Yaqub, who has joined us virtually. She's a former Minister of Social Welfare and Women Development, Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. She has also served as the former Secretary General of the Kashmir Working Group at Institute of Policy Studies, Islamabad. Ms. Farzana is also member of Young Global Leaders Advisory Group at the World Economic Forum. Before proceeding further, I have a few requests to make. This webinar will be conducted in the form of a panel discussion during which each speaker is allotted 15 minutes. After the presentation from speakers, I would request the audience to share their views, if any, or any question that they may pose to the speaker. The virtual participants are requested to please use the Q&A box to type your question along with your name and organizational affiliation. It is also requested to please be brief in your questions so that all the questions can get answered within our allotted time. It is an open house event and will be reported in print and electronic media. The event is already live streamed on the SVI Facebook page, and complete recording of the event will be available on the SVI YouTube channel. Now, without further ado, I would like to request Dr. Naeem Saleh, Executive Director, Strategic Vision Institute, to deliver his remarks. So please over to you.
Thank you, Zuhra, and I welcome our guests, Brigadier Khurshid and Mr. Awais Anwar, as well as Ms. Farzana Yaqub. Actually, we celebrate this Kashmir Solidarity Day every year, and over a period of time, I feel that it has become kind of a routine, formal kind of an affair without any seriousness. We just go through the motions and don't do anything serious on this day. Whereas we have to not only refresh our memories about the history of the dispute and its various aspects, particularly in a think tank environment and in academia, we need to study. Interestingly, I came across these two very historical documents. One is the Kashmir dispute after 6 years, written by Mr. Joseph Corbel, who was a diplomat from Czechoslovakia and appointed as special representative of UN in India and Pakistan for the resolution of Kashmir dispute in very early days of the dispute. Later on, he settled in the United States and taught at some university there. And you will be interested in knowing that Madeleine Albright, who was at one time Secretary of State in the US, this fellow is father of Madeleine Albright. So a very well-known figure. And The other one is Kashmir, a case study in United Nations mediation. This is written by an academic who carried out research. He visited both India and Pakistan and also visited Kashmir, talked to people, discussed many things. And he has also analyzed how the process of mediation, UN mediation worked, where were the obstacles and hurdles and why they could not be overcome. And this issue continued to linger on. There is also vague understanding of the UN resolutions as to what was the implication of the UN resolutions, what was the context, what was the text of different resolutions. And that is why we just keep saying that the Kashmir problem needs to be solved in the light of UN Security Council resolutions without having read the text of those resolutions. I think on such occasions, we need to go through these and refresh our memories because only then we can talk with some authority and with some knowledge if we read those. I will not go beyond this because we started a bit late, and I would like our speakers to share their views with us. But just before I close, I would like to read this one paragraph from Mr. Joseph Corbell's article, and that will give you a fair idea of how this issue got entangled into India-Pakistan rivalry. He says that the records of 6 years of mediation in the Kashmir conflict point clearly to the responsibilities of the governments of India and Pakistan. Pakistan cannot, on balance, be charged with blame for the failure to resolve the controversy. It accepted the Security Council's resolutions, Sir Owen Dixon's proposals, and most of Dr. Graham's recommendations. It was willing to submit the problem of demilitarization to an arbitrator, and it welcomed the British Commonwealth's informal suggestions. India refused them all. Yet India continues to claim that all are out of step except Johnny. It cannot, however, escape major responsibility. It must painfully be stated for failure to solve the Kashmir problem. So he is very squarely blamed India for creating hurdles in the resolution of the problem right in the very early days in the first 5-6 years of the dispute. And another interesting aspect which I came across was that generally the impression is that the Simla agreement stated that all disputes between India and Pakistan would be resolved bilaterally without the involvement of international organizations. Although towards the end of that text, if you look at Simla agreement text, Pakistan got a sentence inserted that without prejudice to the stated positions of the two parties. And Pakistan's stated position on Kashmir has been that it should be resolved according to the UN resolutions. So, but general impression is that we went into bilateral mechanism and we abandoned the international aspect of this resolution of this dispute. But what I came across during this study was that as far back as August 1953, when the Pakistani Prime Minister at that time, Chaudhry Muhammad Ali, he visited Delhi and there were extensive negotiations spent over 2-3 days between Chaudhry Muhammad Ali and Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru. The joint communique which was issued on 20th August, it actually called for bilateral negotiations between India and Pakistan to resolve this issue, and didn't even mention the United Nations or any role that it could play. So this bilateral mode of resolving this problem even was proposed as far back as 1953. So So just to set the ball rolling, I just made these few brief remarks, and I would now like to hand over the stage to the speakers.
Thank you, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, sir. In fact, I don't consider myself to be a fit case to be as one of the speakers, because I spent about 10 years at a very low level of leading a cadet college and taking care of the students up to FSC level. So almost I'm participating almost about after 10 years. But still, I'm very grateful that you have invited me for this very special opinion, and I will try to justify the subject which has been given to me. Subject is reprisal of the Kashmir conflict, indigenous freedom movement. Very brief background, and I would start with a quote from the Thucydides. He says, "The strong do as they can, and the weak suffer what they must." The Jammu and Kashmir, a landlocked state, was one of the princely states which existed under the supremacy of the British Crown. The modern state of Jammu and Kashmir developed gradually from the Dogra heartland Jammu as the home of the many different ethnic groups and diverse set of cultures, including Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, and Buddhism. Kashmir upheaval goes back in 1931, when the people rose against the feudal rulers that was crushed forcefully. The uneasy relationship between Maharaja regime and the local population continued thereon. However, by 1934, realizing the pulse of the people, Maharaja gave way and allowed limited democracy in the form of legislative assembly consisting of the council of ministers. The assembly could hardly satisfy the local community. Partitions of the subcontinent. At the time of liberation, the state of Jammu and Kashmir became the victim of a dispute that could not be resolved, and it was sabotaged by Maharaja with the full backing of India and British. The historical events starting from May 1947 to October 1947 indicate that Maharaja was preparing to join India without publicly declaring it. His attempt to disarm Kashmiri Muslims, especially belonging to Punch division, was an indication of his intent, which was resisted. As a result, the guerrilla movement developed in the present state of Azad Kashmir, drawing strength from ex-soldiers from the Punch division, who earlier had participated in World War II as part of the British Indian Army. Ladies and gentlemen, Maharaja's double standards, followed by Indians' intelligence move, led to the first India-Pakistan war over Kashmir. In my considered opinion, if Sheikh Abdullah, a pro-Indian Kashmiri leader from Valley, had not played in Indian hands and helped mobilize the people from Kashmir Valley in collaboration with the movement initiated by the people of Azad Kashmir, the situation would have been very different. Sheikh Abdullah realized later, but it was too late. I believe at a time, if you commit a mistake, you may have to pay a very heavy price to redress the impact of the mistake. Ladies and gentlemen, on 1st July 1948, India brought the Kashmir problem to the United Nations Security Council under Article 35 of the UN Charter. UN intervention resulted in a ceasefire between forces of two countries. The UN adopted two resolutions, one each, on February 1948, 5th February, and on 13 August 48, and founded the UN Commission on India and Pakistan. Besides other prerequisites, it stated that the question of the accession of the state of Jammu and Kashmir to India or Pakistan would be decided through a free and impartial plebiscite. Subsequent UN resolutions on the subject also reiterated the same stance. However, both sides remained undecided about the demilitarization procedures and failed to achieve consensus despite the sincere efforts made by the UN-sponsored mediators. I call these two resolutions as a concertina resolution. And I have a reason to say subsequently we will discuss. With each passing day, India continued to achieve a tight control over Indian occupied Kashmir through the domestic moves as well as international maneuvers. Since the late 1950s, the UN decided to give a cold shoulder to the dispute, which resulted into two wars between India and Pakistan, 1965 and subsequently 71 war. The Shimla Agreement of 1972 further weakened Pakistan's stance on the Kashmir issue and related UN resolutions to a great extent. The mistake that Sheikh Abdullah committed in 1947, the entire Kashmiri nation is paying the price since then. Very brief struggle of Kashmiri people during the 1980s and 1990s. During this period, the frustrated Kashmiris from Indian-occupied Kashmir decided to take arms against Indian forces deployed inside. The government of Pakistan also decided to provide them with arms and logistics support. In addition, volunteers fighters from Pakistan and Azad Kashmir were also allowed to cross line of control and join Kashmiri Mujahideen in their fight against occupied forces. For quite some time, the fighter groups from Pakistan and Azad Kashmir continued to get local support and cause extensive damage to India's military setups. Pakistani sides wanted that the situation should remain under control and at no stage it should get out of control, which might lead to an open war with India. The independent opinion makers based in UK have links to the Kashmiri freedom fighters' view that Pakistani intelligence did not play well, as they were doubting the credibility of the Kashmiri freedom fighters on the assumption that they might go for an independent option at their own and after getting rid of India. They said during the early 1980s, the Kashmiri community, both Muslims and Hindu Pandits, were working together to fight against India, but the intelligence of both sides managed to divide them. However, the Indian intelligence agencies managed to make an ingress in the ranks and the file of the Mujahideen from Indian-occupied Kashmir and Pakistan and succeeded to create a rift within them. General Aziz Khan, the former chairman Joint Chief of Staff, in a formal interview, who was then the chief coordinator of these groups, said, during the mid-90s, these fighters groups started fighting among themselves and both sides, Pakistani and Kashmiri Mujahideen, were on the verge of collapse. They were effectively targeted by Indian RAW and other intelligences. Thus, the Kashmiri freedom struggles almost died down in 1995. Unfortunately, Pakistani intelligence failed to have proper control over the fighter groups and let Indian intelligence cause damage. The nuclear explosion of 1998, the Kargil episode, and the subsequent incident of 9/11 put Kashmir's armed struggle in reverse gear and the Pakistan-Kashmir policy in shambles. Kashmiri struggle, second phase in the backdrop of incident of 9/11. Ladies and gentlemen, the real beneficiary of the incident of 9/11 has been India. Following the incident, Pakistan has been compelled to take a U-turn on its Kashmir policy. Pakistan was pressurized by the international community, duly led by the US, in close collaboration with India, to give up its moral and physical support to Kashmiri freedom struggles, whom Pakistan has been actively supporting since 1947. Sequel to 9/11, legitimate struggle of Kashmiri people for Azadi was labeled as terrorism, and as said earlier, India became the main beneficiary. Starting from 9/11 over the next decade, in the absence of Pakistani support, the Indian forces managed to isolate jihadi groups inside Indian-occupied Kashmir and targeted them one by one and almost succeeded to eliminate them. Due to compromises made by Pakistan, India managed to seal off the line of control by laying effective fencing throughout the length. Thus, even illegal crossing attempt by the volunteers of the line of control to support jihadi groups inside Kashmir is almost impossible. In an informal discussion with a responsible person from Indian-occupied Kashmir, he revealed that ordinary citizens of the valley are under intense pressure because every second day, Indian personnel from intelligence agencies would enter in their houses without prior information and search the houses threadbare. He said the people of Indian-occupied Kashmir are not allowed to keep even a knife beyond a certain size. Yet, despite strict checks and balances, Kashmiri youth once again got up and started struggling for their independence and suffered massively due to the aggressive posture of the Indian forces. There was no sign that the Kashmiri youth would submit in face of India's military aggression. Post-August 5th, 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, during mid-2019, India moved tens of thousands of the additional troops into the valley, already one of the most militarized regions in the world, and launched a security crackdown against the innocent people by suspending communication and placing heavy restrictions on movement and public gatherings. Since August 5, 2019, the Indian occupied Kashmir remains under siege. Revoking Article 370, which we will discuss subsequently, paved the way for a full settler colonial project in Kashmir, much like Jewish settlement in the West Bank. As a result of the Indian initiative, everyone has a sense of bitterness. There's a sense of injustice, demeanment, and humiliation. The transformation of Indian occupied Kashmir into a union territory reflected a political holocaust inflicted on the people. Anuradha Bhaushan, a Kashmiri scholar, writes, the gradual encroachment in Kashmiri rights and the growing prospects of colonizations could set the region on fire. The people of occupied Kashmir consider this move as a political betrayal and the beginning of an era where violence as an argument will be justified. Syed Babar, a lawyer based in Kashmir main city Srinagar, said, he feared India's decision would lead to a rise in radicalization and would serve as an invitation to foreign militants. He added, there is no room for dialogue now. The space for politics has been bulldozed, and there is nothing to negotiate about between the people of Kashmir and the government of India. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan's Kashmir policy since 9/11. Since 9/11, there is a general feeling that Pakistan has not taken a tough stance concerning its moral and legal support for Kashmiri's ongoing freedom struggle. Since the start of the 21st century, we have restricted our support to the limits of rhetoric and symbolic representation in the annual sessions of the General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly. In 2004, President Musharraf proposed the idea of demilitarization of 7 zones of the Kashmir based on the criteria of the religion, language, and culture, for which he had to face a bashing from within Pakistan for rollbacking Kashmir policy. However, in his response, Indian Prime Minister then said that India would not agree to any redrawing of the boundaries or another partition of the country. Despite Pakistan's lenient view on the Kashmir since 9/11, India does not take into account Pakistan's concern anymore. The discourse of Indian leadership demonstrates that it is not prepared to talk about the Kashmir issue anymore because India enjoys overwhelming support from the world community, including the US, Israel, and Russia. Thus, the United Nations Security Council resolutions do remain valid, but practically lost their values. India's decision to scrap Jammu and Kashmir's decade-old special status on August 5, 2019 clearly demonstrates the response of the general power, of the great power, and the Arab world led by Saudi Arabia. Following the Israeli model, Indian forces are committing human rights violation in Indian occupied Kashmir, and there is no one to stop India from doing these criminal acts. The Indian police force in Kashmir is an extremely nefarious institution which is engaged in war crimes and has complete impunity to do what it wants to Kashmiri people. However, the divided UN is unconcerned about the human rights violation taking place inside Indian occupied Kashmir and elsewhere in India. Resultantly, it appears that the Kashmiri people are disappointed with both India as well as Pakistan and have decided to distance themselves from both of them because of unaccounted losses of life, property, and honor, and the mental stress through which the entire Kashmiri community had to go through, for which they hold both India and Pakistan responsible. The prolonged stalemate might cause despondency among the people of Jammu and Kashmir, which will have serious implications for sustainable peace in the region. The stalemate will lead to a renewed armed struggle solely by the Kashmiri militants. In such like scenario, it is viewed that the Pakistan and India would surely be dragged into a crisis, and what would be the outcome of such crisis in the future, it is anybody's guess. To conclude, the people of Indian occupied Kashmir are in the state of war with India since 1947, and they were in state of war with Maharaja since 1931. At present, the wind across the globe is blowing against them. They stand isolated and at the mercy of India. Unfortunately, Pakistan is going through the worst patch in history. Due to non-serious and corrupt political leadership, Pakistan is socially and politically fragmented and polarized. In its 75 years of history, Pakistan has failed to produce an icon. The institutional strength of the country is altogether missing. On the economic side, it is struggling for its survival. Its 220 million population is also unconcerned about its surrounding and struggling for two-time meals only. Pakistan does not have the strength to come forward and take a proactive stance on the Kashmir issue. Because of the poor governance and the bad economic policies, we have no standing in the world, hence we badly lack options to pursue our foreign policy effectively and aggressively. Nevertheless, let me conclude that due to multiple factors, as explained above, we may not be fighting a war with India in support of the people of occupied Kashmir. Let me repeat that due to multiple factors, as explained above, we may not be able to fight a war with India in support of the people of occupied Kashmir. But irrespective of the nuclear status of the two countries, Pakistan might be required to initiate a war with India due to other compelling reasons, including the issue related to just distribution of water. Our water agreement with India is in danger, and any stupid act by India that is likely could force Pakistan to go for a do or the die mission for its survival. However, in such scenario, Pakistan will be fighting the war in isolation without the support of the people of Azad Kashmir, of the people of Indian occupied Kashmir. Thank you very much for patient hearing.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to request Mr. Awais Anwar to deliberate on Indian illegal occupation of Jammu and Kashmir and international law perspective. So you have the floor now.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I'd like to thank the Institute for inviting me. Thank you very much, sir. It's certainly an honor to speak, not only at the SVI, but also on this particular topic. I just wanted to address some of the comments made by Brigadier Saab. I very much appreciate, the perspective he's bringing. I would, however, slightly like to differ in the approach that Pakistan has adopted. We also have to be cognizant of the difficulties that Pakistan has gone through over the past 7 decades or so. If we talk about Shimla, what were the circumstances in which Shimla was signed? It's difficult really to be able to picture the decisions we've taken in the past with the spectacles of today, right? And so I think we have to give a little bit of we have to be generous at times with understanding how history has unfolded. We have always been the smaller player in this dyad. We've always been the often at the receiving end of things. Having said that, I fully agree that there is so much that we have at times missed out on, opportunities that were there, that are still there, that we are not utilizing. There has been a fundamental disconnect in our ability to properly develop a narrative on Kashmir. And there are many aspects to this. Because I have an international background, will try to speak on those aspects. I think Pakistan fundamentally, one of the elements is that we don't have clarity on the status of Kashmir under international law. The problem is there is also no clarity on this status under international law internationally. So global scholars have not really dealt with this issue. If you look at the literature, the academic literature, there's a vacuum on Kashmir. There's no clarity that's been given that, is this a disputed territory? How is it a disputed territory? What are we calling it, right? And similarly, I mean, there's nothing outside, but domestically, if we are so concerned and we have so many stakes in Kashmir, why have we not invested in the academic, building the base for an argument on Kashmir? We have often always taken this as an emotional, a rhetorical approach to Kashmir. We've never really done the homework that needs to be done. So a fundamental area where we've missed out on is the international aspect. So let me just state, the words we use in our messaging. Indian illegally occupied Kashmir. The term occupied, if you look at it in common parlance, we understand it's taking over of an area. But legally, it has a very distinct meaning. An occupation is a type of an armed conflict that takes place. And when armed conflicts, any type of armed conflict takes place, you apply the laws of war, which is known as international humanitarian law. So an occupation, there are certain requirements to meet an occupation. Have you ever seen in our messaging that, okay, this is Pakistan's stance, and we believe that Indian occupied Kashmir is an occupation because it meets these requirements. What are those requirements? That certain territory is placed under the control of the hostile enemy. This is the Hague Regulations, customary international law. This is the definition. But it's not easy to really understand it. Let me give you what the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, considers an occupation. Unconsented to effective control over territory to which you don't have sovereign title to. So this is my territory. This is the opposition's territory. I forcibly capture this. So I don't have consent. I now have control over this territory in the sense that there is no fighting going on. I've suppressed whatever fighting there is. I've controlled it. I can impose my laws on it. And thirdly, I don't have sovereign title to this. I only have sovereign title, jaise ghar ki title deed hoti hai, things like that, to my own territory. This would have been the opposition's territory, and they have sovereign title to it. So I don't have these things. If you can meet these three criteria, it is considered an occupation. So can we meet these criteria, referring to Kashmir? Our argument is that yes, we can, but then why have we not included it in our narrative? Okay, so let's quickly go over this. The first thing is sovereign title. How does India establish sovereign title to Jammu and Kashmir? India says that there was an instrument of accession, which was in our favor, and then a constituent assembly was established in 51, and in 57 it closed down. In this period, it basically ratified this instrument of accession and declared Kashmir to be part of India. There's one problem here from an international law perspective for India, and that is that in 51, the UN Security Council resolution was passed saying any decision by the Constituent Assembly will not be accepted. The only solution for transfer of title to India is through the act of a free and fair plebiscite. Then when the Constituent Assembly ended its exercise, again another Security Council resolution, which said that this decision of the Constituent Assembly is not going to be accepted under international law. The only way that the title of Kashmir can be determined is through a free and fair plebiscite. So sovereign title, India cannot establish. This is a legal argument. The second requirement is effective control. India has hundreds of thousands, 700,000 there, soldiers there, police officers there, who are maintaining control. India has extended its entire constitution almost to that region. That is under international law, effective control. Right? If there is a police wala on every street corner, you have effective control over that territory. Right? They have suppressed, as Brigadier mentioned very rightly, they have suppressed any indigenous freedom struggle, which they have labeled terrorism as well. And we can discuss that. Finally, unconsented to. Weren't the Indian troops invited by the Maharaja Hari Singh after the instrument of accession was signed? There's a problem here. There's an inherent conflict of interest. And it's a little nuanced, so let me discuss this. He invited them, but an invitation to, say, a guest who I call to my house doesn't mean you spend the next 20 years in my house, right? So when the invitation was made, ultimately the decision of who is sovereign lies with the people of Kashmir through free and fair plebiscite. So ultimately, they're the only ones who can determine whether Indian troops should be allowed on Kashmiri territory or not. And so the very tool that is preventing them from doing this are the Indian troops. So you see how there's a circular argument which India is using to its benefit to prevent consent or not consent. So in that sense, and we've seen this in the Eritrea case at the ICJ, that this concept of conflict of interest vitiates any consent that could have been given before, or that any invitation was made. So all three requirements have been met under international law. Our legal position is very strong here when we call it an occupation. But then there's another problem. When we are in a wartime situation or an armed conflict situation, it is distinct from a peacetime situation, right? That's the opposite of the two. When atrocities take place in a peaceful situation, say outside here or in some country in Europe or something like that, we refer to those as human rights violations, right? People have rights, those have been violated, those rights emanate from international conventions, the ICCPR, the ICESR, CEDAW, Child Rights Convention, all of those. And of course, domestic constitutions and things like that. The problem that we see here is when you're in a wartime situation, the same atrocity, you're not going to call it a human rights violation. You're going to call it a violation of the laws of war. And another name for the violations of the laws of war is known as war crimes. But have you ever seen Pakistani narrative building use the term war crimes? Very recently, it started happening, but we don't really use the correct terminology. Jang ki halat mein aap human rights violations ki terminology nahi use karte. It's a secondary thing. The first thing is war crimes. So again, we have to build that. Say the international community doesn't buy our argument that an occupation takes place. You also have another reason why an armed conflict is existing in Kashmir, the fact that you have a line of control and that there are armed forces there. And at least before the ceasefire, there was continuous barrage of shelling, artillery, gunfire between the two countries. That is an armed conflict. The definition of armed conflict is the first bullet across an international border requires the application of international humanitarian law, the laws of war. So we know that this situation is an armed conflict situation. Let's start using the terminology. Even if you can't prove and say the international community, because India has become the blue-eyed baby of the international community recently, especially the West, you can't convince them that a wartime situation exists there, an occupation exists there. You have another tool at your disposal, and that is the concept of crimes against humanity. And everything India is doing, if you look at the definition, crimes against humanity is a number of atrocities, murder, torture, forced transfer of populations, done as part of a systematic or widespread targeting of a civilian population. Pellet gun use in India. I mean, pellet guns is a very nice euphemism for it. It was a shotgun. Let's call it what it is. It was a shotgun that was fired at people. The pellets would go into their eyes. The Indians had to change their policies, this and that. But this was clearly widespread and systematic, or either one of the two. Systematic means that it was part of a policy, a government policy. These guns, these shotguns were issued to the police by the Indian government. So that is clearly, it helps establish that. Why are we not building on this narrative and using this as a stronger footing when we talk about Kashmir and the atrocities that are taking place there? Right? Human rights violations happen everywhere in the world. If a police person arrests you illegally, that's a human rights violation as well. It doesn't hit the same, you see. And of course, any type of violation needs to be addressed through the proper legal channels and internationally taken up. But it's really the level of atrocities, the magnitude of the atrocities that we need to address in the situation in Kashmir. What can we do about this now? So legally, and we can have a long discussion on Article 370 and the post situation after August 5th, 2019. But I just wanted to just before I close, talk about some of the options that we have under international law. The first is formally documenting the atrocities. We need to have a record of what's happened. And I'm not talking about a skewed version where we try to make it look worse than it is. It's already as bad as it needs to be. Right? You don't have to add Mirch Masala to it to make it seem worse. It's already a very terrible situation, what the Indians are doing there. So this needs to be addressed. Just documenting it is a critical aspect, because from that, what you have is something that you can use that documentation for a number of things. The other issue that I would say, and this flows from the first point, is naming and shaming. There are Indian officers of the police, J&K police, there's also people of the Indian Army who are involved there in atrocities. Cases have gone all the way up to the Indian Supreme Court, which have documented this. You can even find their LinkedIn profiles. Okay, they have been awarded medals at times for the atrocities they've done, which under international law, under international human rights statutes, under laws of war would be considered illegal and would be violations, war crimes. These people have been, many jurisdictions have something known as Magnitsky legislation, where human rights violators are sanctioned. So these are unilateral sanctions from, say, the US, the UK, Australia, a number of European countries that have these laws. Mention these people so that they're picked up and they're blacklisted. Then they lose visas, they lose travel, they can't open up bank accounts, they can't travel to these countries. All of these restrictions are imposed on them. They can't get funds from these countries. They can't be trained by these countries. Okay. So these are some of the actions that we need to take to make it more punitive, more painful for the Indians to do the atrocities that they're doing. Right? So naming and shaming them, put a picture to it. When I hear about atrocities, I need to be able to see that there's an officer who was involved in this. He violated his code. He violated international law. Make that clear. The third is, again, we discussed, we should shift the narrative from human rights violations to war crimes and crimes against humanity. And there are a number of other options. I've run out of time, but things like universal jurisdiction. Kashmiri diaspora is the strongest tool we have, the Kashmiris have for upholding and strengthening their case. People who have been affected by this, there's legislation that allows, or there are rules that allow for you to take up a case in another country. In Germany, we've seen this. In Argentina, we've seen this. In Belgium, we've seen this. So people like General Pinochet, who did atrocities in South America, he was tried in Europe, even though there was no real link there. So we have these tools under the international scheme. It's just that you need to have that confidence to do it. One final suggestion, and this is something that I've been warming up to, is perhaps approaching the ICJ. The International Court of Justice, you can't really go to it. India has blocked all channels, but you can perhaps obtain an advisory opinion on it. There is an advisory opinion. How would you get this? You would have to get a vote from one of the UN organs. There could be the General Assembly, Security Council, or one of the 14 or 16 specialized bodies of the UN, ECOSOC, things like that. And they have fewer membership. But this is it's going to be a Herculean diplomatic task. But if you can get that reference, just like the Palestinians have gotten one, that might change the status quo. We have to realize the status quo does not suit us anymore. It may have been okay before 370 was abrogated. Right now, it doesn't suit us anymore. So if we are to rejig the playing board, if we're trying to reset the thing, this might be something that goes in our favor, because we do understand India is on a weaker international law footing in this case. Those are my points. If there are any questions, we can certainly take them up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker of the webinar is Ms. Farzana Yaqub. She will be sharing her views on Indian repression in Kashmir in the post-2019 period, options for Pakistan. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. The speakers before me have spoken at length about everything. It's always slightly difficult to talk about Kashmir because we've yet to see any ease for the Kashmiris. And we're still here discussing and trying to understand about the conflict. The narrative, as usual, is still not clear. We're trying to move towards it. Both the previous speakers have brought a lot of clarity of where we have gone wrong. And thank you so much, Awais, for sharing solutions. And that is what I have always requested, that when we're discussing Kashmir, we need to jog our memories, we need to talk about the past, but we must look forward and we must share solutions. Good or bad, merit or demerit can be discussed, but we have to consider that we have to move forward, and we cannot be moving forward by using old means. And so youngsters like Awais and other lawyers are doing exceptionally well. So let's start taking over from these brilliant suggestions that Awais has provided. So Kashmiri lawyers have filed a case in UK. I think it's called Metropolitan War Crime. And one case has been filed, and that case is very I wouldn't call it peculiar, but at least that case is about a resident of Azad Jammu Kashmir crossing over into the illegally Indian occupied Kashmir, being apprehended, and then later on being murdered. And his family took up this case, and that case was filed in UK. This, I think, happened last year. So clearly, Kashmiris are moving forward. Now, the atrocities that have been taking place post-2019, basically, it is clear that India is following the footsteps of Israel. Whatever Israel has done to Palestine and in Palestine is being done in Kashmir. Properties are being taken away by Kashmiris. Their houses are being decimated, and especially the political representatives, the Hurriyat representatives, their houses are also being taken away from them. There's a whole list. I think Indian government has made a list which just yesterday was being shared, is around 8,000 pages. And in that, there is also the office of UN MOGIP in Kashmir, which is planned to be taken apart. So it's not just the Kashmiris that are facing the brunt of oppression, but it is other organizations as well. International media representatives, the Kashmiris who are working for international media, they have been awarded, they've been recognized for their efforts and their talent and their skill. Khurram Parvez being one of our he's not a journalist, he's a human rights defender, but he has been incarcerated for a very long time, and the latest Kashmiri to receive acknowledgement and a prize is Khurram Parvez. But previously, post 2019, we've also seen that the coverage of Kashmir by Kashmiri journalists for international media channels, they've been awarded. They've been recognized for their efforts, particularly so because it is so extremely difficult for them to be working in illegally Indian-occupied Kashmir. I would also I will be using the words that Owais had suggested, and most of the Kashmiris have started moving towards that yes, we do believe, and it is war crimes that are taking place. In Kashmir, war is going on. How can you explain the existence of 900,000 plus forces, be it army or police or whatever other units that are placed over there? And so for the population that is in Kashmir to have such a huge number of armed personnel, it is clearly we're at war. And so that gives the right to Kashmiris to fight back. It is very important to acknowledge that Kashmiris have fought back just by using stones. They hardly have any ammunition. Pakistan has used, the policy has been always that whatever the UN resolutions are, those are the ones that we will. But it's sometimes what we have noticed is that Pakistani stance tends to be slightly apologetic. Sometimes it becomes very apologetic. So we must accept and acknowledge that Kashmiris have the right to fight back. Now, if Kashmiris are going to be harassed and if they are going to be killed by Indian army, which is laced with the best of ammunition, the least that Kashmiris can do is try to survive, try to fight back, and they do. And so we must own them and acknowledge them for their bravery and for their courage. And these words which we use, that infiltration, as if we're accepting that LOC is an international boundary. We Kashmiris do not accept it. So if a Kashmiri is crossing over, it is not an illegal act for us, the Kashmiris. And that brings me to something which is very important, that Pakistan is loyal for Kashmiris. This is the only country which speaks about Kashmir and the Kashmiri stance. But we in Azad Jammu Kashmir need to be more vibrant. The government of Azad Kashmir needs to be more vibrant in Pakistan, and the government of Pakistan and AJK need to really sit down and chalk out a plan, because the relationship between Azad Jammu Kashmir and the government of Pakistan is according to an agreement which was signed, which is called the Karachi Agreement, and which gives the foreign affairs responsibility to Pakistan. Now, the representative portion of foreign affairs, of course, because Pakistan is a recognized country, and so there are places where only Pakistan can talk, and it should. But that does not mean that the AJK government should not be sharing this responsibility. They do go and represent Kashmir in the OIC Kashmir Contact Group, within the European Parliament, and within the UN as well. But we need to increase the visuals. We need to see the Kashmiri government which is the representative government of all of Kashmir, because it also has seats for illegally Indian occupied Kashmiri representatives. There are 12 seats. People hardly know the constitutional setup of Azad Jammu and Kashmir and how to use it for maximum benefit. Understanding the circumstances and how well can we represent Kashmir? Kashmiris need to be there on the table. It is not a bilateral issue. The minimum we can say it is a trilateral issue. Until and unless Kashmiris are not on the table with the other decision makers, we will not see any progress. Which reminds me that the apparently closest we were to some kind of settlement, which the world feels that we were very close, is during President Musharraf's time, the so-called Musharraf formula. But I must say that probably for others, it was the closest that we were. But for Kashmiris, it was not an acceptable solution, whatever it was, the 4-point agenda. It was not accepted by Kashmiris. And so, thank God, it did not progress. What we also see is that the lack of understanding of this issue and the kind of coverage that the Pakistani media gives to Kashmir, that needs to improve a lot. Kashmir is just not only a human rights issue. There are a lot of perspectives, and Awais has shared quite a few. Now, naming and shaming. Khurram Parvez, who is incarcerated, I think in 2014, they presented, in 2012 most probably. I'm forgetting the dates. Now they compiled the cases that have been lodged against the Indian Army. It's called Structures of Violence. I would suggest that every think tank in Pakistan must go through that book. You can find it online most probably. Parvez Imroz, who started this work, and Parveena Ahangar have been awarded Draft 2 Peace Prize, which is equivalent to Nobel Peace Prize. Now, Kashmiri efforts have been recognized to the highest level. There are Kashmiri heroes and heroines, and how many of them are known in Pakistan? How many of them are celebrated? We have very few that we know, and those are mostly political leaders. Excellent. But we should also recognize and acknowledge the efforts of other people, of the journalists, of the human rights defenders who have been working day and night. Now, this compilation has been kept regular. It is being updated. And so anyone who wants to name and shame, be it our diaspora or anyone else, you don't need to really go very far. It wouldn't be very difficult to find who are these perpetrators, because this compilation work is going on and Kashmiris are doing that. They're facing it is a very difficult task. They're facing this, but they're doing this important work. Documentation of the atrocities of Indian Army, documentation of the atrocities of the Indian government. All we need to do is present it to the world. And I can't say it, we should be discussing this more and more, this naming and shaming, and also filing more cases against the Indian Army, filing more cases against the Indian government. Just like Modi, before he became Prime Minister of India, he was not allowed to go to enter America, because a civil society organization had filed a case against Modi because of the events that took place in Gujarat. And so he was not allowed to enter America. We can do that again, and we should do that. I think probably my time is up, so we can talk more during the question and answer session. Once again, thank you so much to the organizers for having this round table. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be now proceeding to the question and answer session. Since we are already running short of time, I would request everyone to please be brief and summarize your views and questions in 2 minutes. I would also like to request the virtual participants to please use the Q&A box to type your questions. So if anyone has any point to make, please go ahead.
If I may ask a question from Mr. Vass. The fact that the UN military observers group in India and Pakistan is still there in Kashmir, and it is probably one of the oldest UN peacekeeping mission in the world. What does this signify in terms of the legal status of Kashmir issue?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. First of all, Al-Mughib is a creation of the UN Security Council. And I think that its biggest role is signifying that a dispute still exists, that all is not well, that this was a ceasefire that was reached, that there is no permanent international border that has been established. However, the Indians may want to push that, and also the fact that there's no normalcy. That this is, if you have observers of a ceasefire, what does that indicate? That with that you've ceased fire from an armed conflict, right? And that so the background to this entire situation is an armed conflict. And again, it goes and supports the position that there is an armed conflict between India and Pakistan. Kashmir is under occupation, and that the rules of international humanitarian law apply, and any great violation of the rules of IHL are a war crime. Right, so that's really, I think, what, in my opinion, the legal consequences of Al-Mughib, its existence. The Indian, on the part of the Indians, their non-recognition or their need for not having Al-Mughib really is based on that original sin that they committed, which was trying to think that they could, through the Constituent Assembly, fulfill that free and fair plebiscite requirement that the UN Security Council had imposed. And they failed miserably, right? In that regard. So, but they have escalated their commitment. They said, no. This is our position. We are going to, live by this decision, die by this decision. And now everything that emanates from that, every decision done after that, has been an illegality because of that original illegality of the Constituent Assembly and of accepting Kashmir as, an integral part of India or anything like that. So really, sir, anything when we're talking about the Indians, there's nothing legal about any of it. Building blocks are really a form of illegality there.
I just want to ask a question from Very Khurshid sir. While concluding your presentation, you said that Pakistan may not go to war with India for the sake of Kashmir, but for certain other reasons, including the major reason which you mentioned is water. And in such a case, you fear that such kind of war will not be supported by the Kashmiris. So I just want to ask you that how could you, make this assumption that, the Kashmiris will not support that war? Or, for example, is that assumption also correct that Pakistan need to go to war with India for the sake of water, or there are other mechanisms? They have totally collapsed. For example, as it is already in the news that India has raised some objections onto the Indus Water Treaty. So your views on that.
So I think very much when I said that, God forbid, if situation comes to that level where we have a matter of survival and our water sources flowing from Kashmir, and if somehow an arrangement is made that status quo to be maintained and we agree to that status quo, then that means that we have given up the Kashmiris and we have compelled them to stay within the Indian Union, and they will become part and parcel of India permanently. So if that is the situation, then India might be one day compelling Pakistan to give up the options of the waters. And water may be a one area where whether you like it or you don't like it, you would not worry about your nuclear weapons, because nuclear weapons may not damage you, but the water, if it is not available and the country is dry down, you will otherwise die. So we will have, if we are left with no other option, so we will actually go and bang against India practically to make sure that our resources, our water resources, which is our share, it is snatched. So in such like situation, if Kashmiris are left alone right now, and our support is too cold, and status quo is converted into a permanent border, then Kashmiris will become part of India practically, and then they might react in a way that, okay, you did not support us at that time. We continue to fight for about 70 years, and we made sacrifices over 100,000 people and number of other atrocities that the Indians have committed. So we did not get that huge support from you. Now you fight a war alone against India, and they might not come up at that time when you require their support. So we need their support to make sure that Khadan Khasta, all rivers, everybody understand, the flow from Kashmir. And if one day they're blocked in one way or the other way, and we all understand the climatic changes which are taking place, and the water is becoming a very, very important commodity. So in that context, I say that Khadana Khasta, if we have to fight a war against India on water and disgruntled Kashmiri then occupied Kashmir would not come and stand. This is my feeling. It can be correct. Allah kare, it should not be correct.
Madam, I would like to ask a similar, not similar, but a question from Madam Fazana. You very rightly said that the Karachi Agreement gave a. Is she there?
Ma'am, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Madam, you said that the Pakistan had the responsibility to represent Kashmiris on the foreign policy. So, can you apprise us or help us understand that what is the framework in the Foreign Office constitutional framework where the Kashmiri point of view is put across and it is taken care of practically, not only through the Kashmir Committee, but at the bureaucratic level? Do we have a representative or a Kashmir desk in Foreign Office which keeps whenever these formulas which you were referring to as the Musharraf formula, which is as I think you said that it is, thanks God that it was not accepted, but could we have or do we presently have any mechanism in the Foreign Office where the input from the Kashmir government is given or is taken?
That's a very interesting question. So I served from 2011 to 2016 as a minister. And at that time, there was close coordination between the governments. It depends on the government as well. But if you're asking for a clear a method which is followed where the Kashmiri government provides its comments or opinions or where they meet up, I have yet to see that. Is there a Kashmir desk? There is always a Kashmir desk in different departments, especially in the interior or the security desks and foreign office as well. Now, who visits those Kashmiri desks? I think foreign office would be more well informed than people like me. So yes, we have to improve the working relationship between AJK and Pakistan as well. Initially, within the Kashmir Constitution, an amendment was made, which is very famous, and it's called the 13th Amendment. Before 13th Amendment, Kashmir Council kind of played that role because it was considered as an equivalent. I wouldn't say it is similar, but as an equivalent of the Senate. And so the Prime Minister of Pakistan and all of them. So Kashmir Council was playing that role. Post 13th Amendment, what the AJK government has done is that it has decreased the role of Kashmir Council. Kashmir Council feels that it has been completely decimated, but AJK government feels that they have decreased the role of Kashmir Council, and the 20% of the budget which was being routed through Kashmir Council is now going directly to the AJK government. There's a lot of hue and cry, and that is why I thought I should mention within SVI that the 13th Amendment was something that the Kashmiris really wanted, and they finally got it. There's a lot of conversation about a expected 15th Amendment, which kind of will be removing all the after effects of the 13th Amendment, and the Kashmiri political parties across the board have said that no, this will not be done. So there is a lot of push and pull when it comes to how the AJK government should be working. And I really hope that there will be a lot more improvement. I might have missed, but as far as I know, the communication gap has slightly increased in the previous years because of different governments. Pakistani, the political party which was in government in Pakistan and the political party which was in government in AJK were both different, and so that caused a lot of difference of opinion. But that is the political side, and it is just that is a regular and routine matter. But that needs to be improved, and I hope that think tanks like SVI can do research on this and come up with good cogent briefs and papers which can advise the governments how to improve their working relationship, because it's not just AJK, it's GB as well. The idea of course there is no issue of making GB a provisional province, but how to go about it and how would that affect the standing of AJK as well as Pakistan's stance on Kashmir conflict is something that has, I think, been taken very lightly, and it shouldn't be. We should be very serious about such changes.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so my name is Hamdan Khan, and I'm a research officer here in SVI. I'd like to ask Brigadier Khushi, you said that post-2001, Pakistan lost the plot as far as Kashmir conflict is concerned. So who is to be held responsible there if we have to hold someone responsible? Second thing, I think, again, it's a comment, the sincerity of purpose seems to be missing somewhere during past at least 2 decades on part of Islamabad, when I say this. Because the people which were appointed and which were supposedly to represent Kashmir, for example, Kashmir Committee in Kashmir Affairs, their credibility or their competence have been seriously compromised. Your comments on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much for very, very deep-rooted kind of questions and your comments. The first part of the question is that who is responsible that after 9/11, Pakistan's policy on Kashmir was put on almost the reverse gear. I won't really blame anyone. We being Pakistani, I was in service, Irsa was in service, and most of us were actively participating at that time, 9/11. After 9/11, as I said, the beneficiary was India. The real beneficiary of 9/11 was India. Because they said war on terror. And in that war on terror, we were also, in a way, we were caught. Although nobody could justify why Pakistan was dragged in that war on terror, we were never responsible for any activity which took place in Washington, D.C. or somewhere else. And none of Pakistani was involved in that terrorism act. But still, I think we were the one that suffered very badly. And since then, we are still suffering. And rest of the countries are out of it, and we are still thick and thin. We are still in that war on terror. So I would say that on Kashmir policy, we had to give up under international pressure. Unfortunately, we were not in a position to actually draw the attention of the international community. This term, war on terror, was actually as a narrative built, and it was very well received by the international community. and especially the powers, great powers, including China, the European Union, the UK, and America, and elsewhere. And even if I'm not wrong, your Muslim countries, they were also actually, they were worried of their own regimes, because they thought that if we don't really toe our line with that of America, there may be a problem with us. So we were isolated. After 9/11, we were in isolation. And before 9/11, we were actively supporting Kashmiris, practically supporting Kashmiris one or the other way, whether it was arms and ammunition, or logistics support, or even training the Jihadis and everybody. So suddenly, we were asked to back out and get away from that activity. And our regime, our government, they were compelled, and they had to actually withdraw their support. So I will not say that one individual is responsible for that particular activity. It is an institutional approach, and I think the government of Pakistan and the institution, those who are involved in direct support of Kashmir, that practically they decided, collectively they decided that this is the right time to stay away for some time. So you will, it was a tactical withdrawal, you can say, that okay, get back for some time, and when we will get the better environment, we will come back. As far as the second part of your comments is concerned, I agree with you. I also narrated in my talk that we were basically rhetorics and statements. 1 year, after 1 year, we go to the United General Assembly, and our Prime Minister or President, whosoever he or she comes out and says, "Dekhen ji, humne aaj Kashmir ka case kitne अच्छे तरीके से present कर दिया." और nobody takes it seriously. Last time, our former Prime Minister Imran Khan, he spoke very well at that forum. My kids, मेरे बच्चों ने question किया, FSC के बच्चों ने, कि बाबा, if you were the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and if you were to go and speak on this occasion, that act was actually after August 5th. What was your speech? How could you comprehend? Are you satisfied with the speech of the Prime Minister of Pakistan? It was a very tough question. And let me be very frank and honest with you. I told them that if I was the Prime Minister of Pakistan, this was the right time to put tremendous pressure on the international community. That India has done this thing. I'm here with you. I'm going to get justice from you people. And I'm sure this community is going to provide justice. I have, by force or by motivation, stopped my nations to stay on, wait. You will not be aggressive. You will not go on productive activities. International community will come and support you, and India will be asked to go back. And right, international communities, my nation is fully prepared to support Kashmiris. And if you don't do the justice, I will not be able to have control over the people of Azad Kashmir and people of Pakistan from supporting the Kashmiri cause. So I would have said like this. So हमने एक रिटोरिक्स है, स्टेटमेंट दे देते हैं, बल्ले बल्ले हो जाती है, वापस आते हैं और उसके बाद खामोश हो जाते हैं. कांस्टेंट प्रेशर. इस वक्त मेरे पास प्रोबेबली ऑप्शन नहीं है कि हम जाके इंडिया के साथ लड़ेंगे. Environments, global environments are very different. We are a nation are almost at the verge of economic collapse. We are struggling, as मैंने कहा, we are struggling to survive. And nobody is listening to you at this stage. But we should continue to maintain our constant stance. उसके अंदर कोई अप डाउन नहीं आना चाहिए. Go back and forth नहीं आना चाहिए. आज आगे चले गए, आज पीछे चले गए, आज स्टेटमेंट दे दी. आज जो आपने नेशनल पॉलिसी बनाई है कश्मीर के ऊपर, be consistent on that policy. So Kashmiris would not get frustrated. They understand कि जी पाकिस्तान के पास तो खुद इस वक्त जो है ना अपनी सर्वाइवल के लाले पड़े हुए हैं, फिजिकली नहीं आ सकता, but at least moral support is available. So consistent policy on Kashmir is important. Our policy on Kashmir has not been consistent over the last almost 2 decades.
I have 2 small questions for Mr. Abbas. One is that how did the change of nomenclature from ceasefire line to line of control in 1972 has affected the legality of the Kashmir issue? Does it have any implication? And secondly, after the 5th August 2019 changes in the Indian Constitution, withdrawal of Article 370 and 35A, what legal options are available to Pakistan to counter this Indian move?
Thank you very much for the questions. So just before I address these, I just wanted to very briefly address the question raised about lack of sincerity on Pakistan's part. I think we should be a little clear on, we should not mistake lack of sincerity with, say, lack of imagination, lack of options, lack of capability. I think after 9/11, Pakistan was on the back foot so much that not only were we being daily impacted by terrorism, we were being accused of being complicit in terrorism. And the terrorism that we were being accused of was, A, supporting the Taliban entities in Afghanistan, and secondly, the India issue came up after Mumbai and after all of these things, where Kashmiri freedom struggle became this terrorist movement. So we were in a very difficult situation. And we didn't play our cards as good as we could have. When you're in such a pressure-tight situation, you don't have the capacity. You make decisions that are, when you're constantly firefighting, you don't take the best decisions. You need to have that, a unit that is able to assess and do those things. Another thing that we failed, I think, on was to challenge India's labeling of the Kashmiri freedom struggle as a terrorist movement. India used everything at its disposal. It has hundreds of people's names who are linked to the Kashmir movement on the UN Security Council designated terror lists. Right? We were not able to target that. We can't even get 4 Indian names on it. People who we know are involved in terrorism. And there are multiple ways of how you can rehabilitate this image. Freedom, as Farzana very rightly mentioned, fighting an occupation is your legal right under international law. We have stopped utilizing this discussion. We are under an obligation under international law to support a genuine freedom struggle, right? Someone that is fighting alien occupation, someone that is fighting an outside power there. We need to first of all strengthen, and not just diplomatic and political support. You can give military support, as in you can give weapons to these entities. This is what the classic international opposition is. And Sir very rightly mentioned that after 9/11, this is diluted. Our role as a country that supports self-determination should have been, no, we're not going to let this slide anymore. Our stated position should have always been that we support, freedom struggles. And all freedom struggles have been labeled as terrorist groups. ANC, Nelson Mandela, Palestinian Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat, they're all labeled as terrorist organizations. The founding of Israel was by Irgun, which was a well-known terrorist organization, right? All of these entities before they become legitimized. So we have this option now to rehabilitate this image. This will require some work from the Kashmiri freedom fighters themselves. One very powerful tool is something known as accepting a voluntary acceptance of IHL. So the laws of war, they generally apply to states, high contracting parties. But you can use, entities that are fighting, non-state actors that are fighting, states, they can voluntarily adopt this. What does this do? IHL says you'll never target civilians, isn't it? So what you do, and the definition of terrorism is targeting civilians. And so you clarify that you are not a terrorist entity this way, right? And we've seen this in the past. There are a number of entities globally who are fighting against states, and they voluntarily accepted these IHL, the Geneva Conventions, essentially. And they've imposed those rules that they'll wear uniforms, they'll act appropriately, this and that, and they can do this. In this particular, Burhan Wani, for example, was wearing a uniform, right? That made him distinct from a civilian. And that is a requirement of IHL, that distinguish yourself from civilian. So things like that can be brought in. It can help rehabilitate this image, bring them back into the fold of freedom fighters, and then help the narrative further. So I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent there. I just wanted to address your question. So in my assessment, and I'll have to study this to be honest, I don't think there is a fundamental difference legally between a ceasefire line and a line of control. India with China has a line of actual control. What this demarcates is something that it doesn't have finality. This is not a permanent border. This is not an agreed border. This is where the forces at the end of hostilities reached. And that has whatever little sanctity that has, that is there. So the events of 5th August, so your question was, what are the options we have after? So again, 370 and 35A, if we look at Pakistan, they don't mean anything to us. They are simply part of that original illegality that took place. And this is the legal structure India did to create its link with Kashmir and whatnot. What the abrogation of 370 did for us was vindicate our position since 1948, which was, this is exactly what we are telling you is going to happen to you. Sheikh Abdullah, don't do what you did. Everything he stood for has been brought to zero because he said, India is the right option, this and that. And we said, that's not what you should be doing. And the Kashmiri movement said, that's not what you should be doing. But he continued with this thing, and today we've seen that happen. This was just a matter of time. That time has come up, gone up. The biggest problem is really for Modi himself right now, because the manner in which Article 370, a constitutional provision, was removed was against constitutional norms. Normally, you have a 2/3 majority to change the constitution. Article 370 ke liye, you required the consent of the Constituent Assembly to change it. Constituent Assembly ended in 57. So what solution did the Indian Supreme Court, Jammu and Kashmir, Srinagar Supreme Court, High Court, both have said that this Article 370 has received permanence. Even though it's labeled on the side temporary provision, it is now a permanent provision because the Constituent Assembly has ceased to exist. And only that could have abrogated this article. So what the Indians did was what Modi did was try to be oversmart. And he changed he used the interpretation clause and changed the meaning of words. So Constituent Assembly became Legislative Assembly. And because at the time the Legislative Assembly wasn't in session, they said that the Lok Sabha, the Indian Parliament, can take decisions on behalf of the Kashmir. So they passed a resolution and the president got rid of 370. So this is trying to be oversmart. Now, if this had come up in our Supreme Court, it would have been struck down like this. This is not how you can amend a constitution. We had a situation in FATA. We had to pass a 2/3 majority 25th constitutional amendment to merge FATA with KP. So, but what has the Supreme Court of India done? It has not taken up the case since 2019. It has allowed this dilatory tactics, this delaying tactics to just keep on continuing. So it gave Modi space that, okay, we're not going to take this up. Aap kuch kar le. The problem is Modi has failed in Kashmir as well. He wanted to turn it into an economic hub. He wanted to turn it into something grand. He wanted to send in millions of Indians and dilute the demographics there. He's failed to do that, right? And that is something that is very telling, that the Kashmiri people are not conducive to this transplant or this approach that Modi has taken. Now what he's trying to do is the G20 summit, G20 meeting, that is going to be, it's going to be problematic for us on a foreign policy front, right? Because that is somewhat of an acceptance of international leaders going there and, territory everything being hunky-dory. So from a international law perspective, 370 really doesn't change the game at all. What it does, however, the most fundamental aspect is that a free and fair plebiscite cannot take place if there is a dilution of the demographics. The demographics have to be maintained. Even under IHL, demographics maintain currently their articles. You cannot forcibly transfer populations out or send your population in to a region which is under occupation. So that itself is a violation of international law, Geneva Conventions. So really, so that's what the position is. Our concern should be that we should not allow for any dilution of the demographics, any change in that sense, because ultimately what that will do is prevent a free and fair plebiscite from ever taking place then. Sorry, longer than that.
Do you have some online questions?
No, sir, not yet.
Okay, so I'd like to clarify one thing. I didn't say that sincerity is missing. I said that sincerity of purpose might be missing, and it is reflected in the appointments of certain people in Ministry of Kashmir Affairs and in Kashmir Committee. So first of all. Second thing, I would like to ask you that, as Sir also said, post-2001, the international discourse changed and it shifted to war on terror or so-called terrorism. But it seems now that after the rise of China and the Ukraine war. Again, this discourse is shifting toward great power competition. And again, with the reference of Ukraine, this illegal occupation, invasion, human rights, international humanitarian law is again coming into the limelight. Given India is also, as you said, blue-eyed boy of China, do you think we have an opportunity?
No, not of China.
Sorry, West. West. India is the blue-eyed boy of West.
Black-eyed boy of China.
Black-eyed boy of China. Do you think we have some opportunity for us to present the Kashmir case in this framework, as in the context of Ukraine and the reinvigorated focus on international humanitarian law and human rights and all these things?
So, would you like to? I certainly believe so. I think, especially with Russian actions, the debate has come back to the issues of occupation, just like you mentioned. Absolutely. So that's a very good point that you raised, that, does this give us better hope? The problem is that international relations, this better than me, I'm not an international relations person, it doesn't apply equally. Right. We have everybody crying tears of blood for Ukraine when a far clearer legal situation in Palestine has been before you for 70 years. Nobody gives a damn. Right. So, you are theoretically equal states, but, some are more equal, obviously. That is one of the issues there. And that's another reason why don't expect any major changes on the Kashmir issue. And I mean, I sometimes laugh when I, go by किसी भी चौक से इस्लामाबाद से गुजरे वहां पे लिखा होता है बड़ा बड़ा कि why is the international community deaf on the issue of Kashmir and things like that. Why do you care about the international community? They're not going to do anything for you on this. Anything that has to be done on Kashmir has to be done by Kashmiris first and Pakistanis second. No one else is going to help you on this unless you escalate it to such a dangerous situation where the threat of nuclear war and this and that somebody comes in and says, okay, third party, kuch ho hoga. And are you willing to take that risk? Probably not. Right?
Just to add one point, as my brother has already indicated, that nobody is interested. Even your close friend China, in my perception, they are just not interested in the status quo to be changed. Because if there is a change in the status quo, then the Chinese will be suffering themselves. They will have to locate a large chunk of the Kashmir, which it has occupied in 1962 or 61. Number two, the Chinese are also worried that if this problem is resolved on the ground of Muslims and the non-Muslim, tomorrow the one of the province of China which is under pressure, the Muslim community, suffering very badly. And people will get up and they will say, we also need an independent status. So I think Chinese are just looking forward for the status quo. And because of that option, if you see the CPAC and conversion of this Gilgit-Baltistan into some kind of province, changing its status from Kashmir to an independent status, these all are the pressures which are coming from China. And under those pressures, we are moving step by step, and practically we are changing the status of even Azad Kashmir. Tomorrow, somebody will ask us that if we have a separate status for Gilgit-Baltistan, our resolution on Kashmir will go for 6. International community would say, which resolutions are you talking about? Are you talking about Azad Kashmir, or are you talking about the Gilgit-Baltistan? Because it was supposed to be a one entity. So even all international community, the superpower, the great powers, and including China, they are not interested in resolution of Kashmir. It is the problem of mine, yours, and the problem of people of occupied Kashmir. How we will move on, what time, how much time we will take, and practically one fine day, you may have to escalate it to that level where the third parties might be compelled to come forward and help you out. Till that time, we are making the statements in the UN Assembly and elsewhere, people are not concerned.
I think I just want to, it's very interesting that in the initial part of the session, we were very happy to listen from you that Kashmir is you can say it is a legal issue and we should try and build our case legally. But towards the end, now you're saying that the law is, or whatever your legal framework is for the powerful and is not equal. This international system is not very equal. So We were, before this start of the session, once we were talking before this session started, what I am thinking of that there is a relationship of the society with the law. This was a colonial society, and the law was not local. It was imposed and it was brought in. And whatever international law which is being practiced, has a European context and it has a colonial baggage, because the British are one of the major players in the formulation of and codification of that international law, and we were the subject of that power. And the relationship with that codified law of this society is kind of a master and slave relationship, and that inferiority complex and then lack of association with that codification of law has no interest, has not, to change that law, for example, and even to interact with that law. So that the legal discourse is kind of a colonial discourse, and it basically undermines our, even the right to object that and then the right to participate even in this formulation. So how do you see this, the inferiority complex in the colonial society and their interaction with that law, and then basing their position on that law and then projecting, because they do not associate themselves with that law and ownership of that law. So that is a domination which came from outside. So how do you think that the inner spirit should associate with that law?
Absolutely. So I think you very rightly hit the nail on the head. We've suffered more. It hasn't been the colonization of our land or our resources for hundreds of years that has damaged us. It has been the colonization of the mind that has damaged us more, right? That inferiority complex where we still say कि CRPC 1986 की जो है 1886 की जो है वो हम change नहीं करें क्योंकि गोरे ने जो किया वो ठीक किया. This is still what is said if you go to the ask lawyers around here. जो पाकिस्तान penal code है 1860 का वो गोरे ने किया ठीक किया. Don't try to change it. Don't try to update it. गोरे ने तो update कर लिया. आपने you still have not done anything. This is a very serious situation that we need to be addressing. And again, it's a capacity issue. It's not having the confidence in your abilities to be able to take the right decision, to be able to make a system that you can foresee, not doing the exercise. Again, if you're firefighting day in, day out, आपके political issues हजार चल रहे हैं, terrorism को आपने fight करना है, your officers are not dealing with these issues to deal with, right? How do you improve your criminal justice system? How do you improve something else? So I think those are some of the issues. With regards to my differing approach, I'm not saying that there's a different approach or that international law offers nothing to us. I'm saying that there are certain VIPs who get fast-track processing. So a country like Ukraine, they're already establishing an international tribunal for Russian war crimes in Europe, in The Hague. I haven't seen anything for those other countries, but it's not that they don't have these options. Like if Pakistan went to the ICJ for say an advisory opinion, again, this is a very contentious issue, but if it does approach, the ICJ will give a decision and it could be in our benefit. In fact, there's a strong chance that it might be in our benefit. Similarly, Ukraine has gone to the ICJ and received very positive judgments in its favor. The Israeli wall advisory opinion, the current advisory opinion that they just sent recently, it got fewer votes than the Israel wall opinion, but it's gone there. It's used an international mechanism to its advantage. And these are all ways where we're not, again, the blue-eyed baby of the world, but we can still use international processes to benefit us. And this is exactly what, some term is lawfare. Using international law to the best of to promote national interests as well as you can. Hope that helps.
Sir, I would like to ask a question. So you said that demographics in Kashmir are basically need to be preserved. But sir, as part of the Indian attempt for changing the demography recently, by granting votes to the non-Kashmiris, and in 2020, the Delimitation Commission announced increasing the seats from 83 to 90. So I actually wanted your opinion on it.
Again, there's so much happening on Kashmir. I'm not updated on everything, but so the seats changing, they've also included seats from Azad Jammu and Kashmir and GB in it, which is always laughing matter, because neither the Constituent Assembly itself had people representatives from this side. Now voting Constituent Assembly itself was a very rigged election that took place. But anyway, that's a different thing. In this particular issue, the demographic change that I'm referring to here is that ultimately, if there is a plebiscite, the people who's going to vote in that? Is it going to be people who are Kashmiri, who are state subjects, right? There was a protection under Article 35A, 370 scheme. You had state subjects who were given, who were the only people who were allowed to buy land in Kashmir, who were the only people who could get certain government quotas, made jobs, positions, university admissions, all of that. And there were certain protections for them, right? Which made them distinct. So somebody from the rest of India, even though Kashmir is an integral part of India, before that, a non-Kashmiri Indian could not buy land there, could not like shift there, move there, make it his home, right? Unless you were posted there by the government. Now what they've done is that they've diluted those. So the domicile laws that they now have is that anyone who's been in Kashmir for a certain amount of time, whether it's government posting, this and that, him and his then family will all get Kashmiri domicile, right? So military officers who served there, police officers from the rest of India, or civil servants who from the rest of India who served there, they will now get automatic domicile and will be able to purchase land, this and that. And the dangerous issues that have already been mentioned now is that India has very much started adopting the Israeli playbook in Kashmir. And so they're talking about building these protected enclaves so the Kashmiri Pandits, the Hindu community that had been evicted from that place through violence, they can come back and they'll be protected, much like the settlements in Palestine, right? And what that does is that opens the door for non-Pandits from India who weren't, displaced as such, to come in and then live in these protected units, exactly like settler colonialism that is taking place in Palestine. The other things that you see, collective punishment to Kashmir mein ho rahi hai. So if there is a freedom fighter who's found, his house will be demolished, his body will not be returned. So house demolition affects his family members. They didn't do anything wrong, and it's a violation of international humanitarian law of collective punishment. That's not allowed. But the Israelis do it in Palestine. The Indians are doing it in India, and not just in Kashmir. You've seen the bulldozed house of Muslims all across India, in UP, and other places. So we're not. What we need to be cognizant here is, this is the last word. We're not dealing with a rational actor. India is not a rational actor right now. It is a Hindu nationalist government that wants to promote this. Kashmir was the last bastion of, say, a Muslim majority state, and it wants to get rid of that. And that's something we need to be very cognizant of, that throughout India, these issues are coming up. And we can also use that to highlight the Kashmir issue, but also the atrocities taking place with Muslims across the country in India.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll now request Dr. Naeem Salik to please give the concluding remarks.
Thank you. I think we had a very good discussion, and both the speakers, they gave very elaborate presentations, and then there were some very good questions as well. There was this reference to Sheikh Abdullah's decision in the 1950s. He suffered during his life because once Indians had got what they wanted, then they put him in jail for many years. And his error of judgment has now been acknowledged by people like Farooq Abdullah, his son, as well as Mehbooba Mufti, another Kashmiri political leader. And they said probably that that decision taken by Sheikh Abdullah and his generation at that time was flawed, and that was an error of judgment made by them. And they actually endorsed Jinnah's point of view of creating a separate homeland for the Muslims. Actually, we have been talking about the status quo. The problem is that the nuclearization of South Asia, which has happened in 1998, it has certain implications. One, that it has given you a kind of assurance of your security, because it provides you the ultimate guarantee of your sovereignty and integrity. But at the same time, the nuclearization also has an impact that it tends to perpetuate the status quo. And the military option to unlock the Kashmir problem is no more there, because the consequences of that could be extremely dangerous. So that has been a limitation now under which we have to live. There were opportunities which we missed, unfortunately, in 1962, particularly once there was this India-China conflict going on, and Pakistan was at that time pressurized by President Kennedy not to take any action in Kashmir, and which Ayub Khan agreed to, but later on he has regretted that under the American pressure and against the opposition of many of his generals, he did not take any action in Kashmir and lost that opportunity. And it was done on the vague promise by the Americans that once this conflict is over, they will persuade India to come to the table and resolve this issue. And as a result of that, in 1963, there was a series of negotiations between Zulfikar Ali Bhutto representing Pakistan and Mr. Swaran Singh representing India, famous Bhutto-Swaran Singh talks. There were probably 4 or 5 rounds of that, but it ended nowhere, and then this process ended. So, unfortunately, with the changing circumstances, people do forget about their promises, but we also need to do our homework and highlight the things like the stage-managed incidents which Indians have carried out in Kashmir. The Chatti Singhpura incident is one such example where they killed the villagers and blamed it on Pakistan. And this coincided with Clinton's visit to India. And then the Americans condemned this act of terrorism, and it went into Pakistan's credit. And then later on, once it was investigated, found to be a stage-managed operation carried out by the Indian security forces themselves. And there have been many such incidents which have been carried out, and later on the investigation proved that the Indian officers or Indian units, just to get some kind of rewards, they stage-manage these kind of things. And this has been discussed by some of the Indian authors as well, but we do not take up these evidence of such kind of incidents and do not highlight these. There have been mass graves which have been discovered. We were never able to highlight it appropriately at the international level. So our projection of the issue, particularly in this age of social media and communications, we have not been able to utilize these facilities. And unfortunately, our media is also, they're all busy in small things just to gain their own benefits. They do not keep in mind the national agenda, and they forget about easily about, if you listen to any TV channel these days, you will hardly find a mention of Kashmir. And probably there'll be some conversations on some TV channels on 5th of February. And after that, people will forget about it. So I think if we want to really move towards bringing up our case effectively at the international forums, we have to continue this movement at various levels, through social media, through your research papers, publications, and also using the media appropriately. So with this, I think it was, I would again say, a very useful session. And I would again like to thank our speakers for joining us and finding time to share their views with us. Thank you very much, and I'm sure you will give them a hand of applause.
Thank you so much, sir. So ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our webinar. I would like to thank our speakers for making it a great learning experience for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.